Good evening, Wade.
Good morning, Rob.
And it's season 3 again, entering the shadows. But this time, we're walking down the left-hand path. And this is where you come in. Brother, what can you say about the left-hand path, my friend?
You know, it's probably one of the most misunderstood aspects of the magical community, even by some of the people who claim to walk it. It's a lot of people try to divide right hand and left hand into, well, this is just good and evil. This is light and love. This is spooky ooky. But honestly, there's as many flavors in the left-hand path as there are anything else.
And it's
necessary,
crazy, right? Because we have two hands. We have the left and the right. And we need to know the left in order to understand the right. They're part of human nature. Am I correct?
Well, a lot of it is kind of, when it comes back to, left, I mean, the originally it came from, the Tantra with right hand Tantra and left hand Tantra, and whether you're doing abstinence or indulgence or all of these things, but they have the same goal. It's opposite methodologies to get to the same goal, and a lot of people miss out on that. Exactly. It's almost the same way with American politics these days. People say, oh, we're going to have all the liberals, we have all the conservatives. Well, we're supposed to have the same goal. It's supposed to be two methods to reach the same goal. And they've diverged. And so you see a lot of the same division in the magical community with a lot of people who really don't know what the terms are. They can only look at it like football teams. Like, if this team wins, well, that team loses.
Yeah.
We can't let them win because we're going to lose. And it's not like that.
And we need to know both aspects of light and shadow in order to grow as a species. And I really respect our upcoming guest, because this man took a topic which a lot of people are scared about, and not only wrote so passionately about it, but he also channeled one of the greatest philosophers ever known, the ever so powerful Friedrich Nietzsche, and incorporated into this legendary work, Friedrich Nietzsche and the Left-Hand Path. So it is without further ado that I introduce our amazing guest for Intro to the Shadows, Mr. Shea Bile. No, Shea Bile. Thank you for being here. I had to do the Shea Bile. It was like, Shea Bile. Welcome to TV, Shea.
Even after we had a few minutes to go over the name, you still decided to be the rebel. It's great to see you guys. You guys are a powerful voice in the community, up and rising, kind of bringing a candid kind of approach and various guests to different elements and spheres of the occult, and it's an honor to be here. I appreciate it. Thank you for the kind words. It's an honor to have you. Life of passion.
And it's anyhow, I want to ask you, Shea, to be totally honest, what got you started? What brought you onto this path, which would probably be the next level for people around the world, the path of the left hand? What inspired you to get involved with this?
Yeah, it started with just a general deference towards the world of the supernatural. I grew up, my mother was, although Catholic, Roman Catholic, she was very new agey. She would channel spirits and discuss past lives. And I saw hauntings as early as I can remember. I had a powerful encounter with a spirit when I was just 4 years old, what they would call a hag attack. And this is a spirit that appears and is suffocating you, and then you kind of pass out. They call them paralysis demons now. Yeah. But and then I just grew up seeing ghosts and my mother talking about past lives, and so I had an interest in the supernatural. And how that started to form is that I grew up in, I was in my early adolescence was in inner city LA in the 90s, and we grew up in a pretty poor area in Linwood. I grew up in Linwood, California. It's right next to Compton. And growing up was torturous. I mean, I was picked on heavily, bullied. I think a lot of us know what that's like. I hate to be the trope. Like, here's the Satanist, I've been bullied. But that all kind of plays into the story about how you view the world and how you have to survive and how you have to understand things. And I wanted to find something religious. So I was interested in magic because I saw magic as early as 12. I thought, okay, I believe these things exist. I've seen it. Maybe there's power there. Maybe it can get me out of my situation. Maybe it could it could help me in my daily life. And so I saw magic as one of the few ways I can change my reality and kind of turn it to my advantage and kind of get things on my side. And but I wanted a religious structure. Witchcraft alone was not. I wanted something bigger, and so I first started with Wicca. Did that for about 6 months to a year, and as soon as we got to the kind of Christian adjacent, whatever you put out comes back to you times 3. So don't do any negative magic. Don't do any bad magic. Don't do anything that might hurt someone because you're gonna suffer for it. But I had people all around me treating me cruelly. And I felt that it didn't have an answer to justice. Wicca at that time did not reconcile suffering and what you have to do in a world of suffering. And I then started to interact with Satanism. And at 13, I walked into a Borders bookstore. I went over to the metaphysical section, saw the Satanic Rituals by Anton LaVey, opened it up. And the very first words on the front says, "On the altar of the devil, up is down, pleasure is pain, freedom is slavery." And I went, fuck, this is me. This is speaking something. There's something kind of radically oppositional. There's something radically empowering. It's saying a no, is what Friedrich Nietzsche would say, a no. It's giving there's, now I found something that understands what I'm going through and now understands, but gives responsibility and accountability for it. But it said it's okay. This is the way the world is, and you're not going to find an immediate reason behind it, and do the best you can with what you have and strive, find a way to strive and find a way to succeed regardless. And even if no one else in this world cares about you, not only should you come to care about and have compassion for yourself, but you should love yourself. And not only that, but in the LaVeyan context, it was see yourself as to God or above God. And I needed to hear that as a kid because I needed someone to tell me that I had value. And the left-hand path just made sense. It was more sympathetic. And it wasn't out of a place necessarily of resentment, although it sounds like I might have some at that point. But it was something that allowed me to love myself and find peace within myself. So yes, I went to Satanism out of the left-hand path, out of a state of desperation, but also it was a journey that would lead to me finding a way to accept who I am, finding a way to embrace who I am, and find peace within myself.
So basically, you found self-identification through pain and self-love. True? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it gave me a better appreciation of the world and a better way to kind of deal with what was happening. I had to understand the world that I live in and make sense of it. And the left-hand path made the most sense to describe what I was going through. A lot of the people around me, some of the horrible people that I encountered, were all devotees of God. They were all Christian devotees. So I immediately thought, and people have been doing this for 2,000 years, they thought, well, if they're on the side of that guy, if they're in the good graces of that guy, then who's on my side? And so the idea and the threat of going to hell wasn't so scary to me, even though I grew up with that there was this one day it broke. And I went, well, if these pieces of shit are in the good graces of that guy, then this guy, it can't, at worst, it can't be worse. Right?
I agree.
And that opened me up to a world of acceptance and a world of empowerment.
All right, the question is, when did Nietzsche come along and becomes, if I'm not mistaken, this is your first book, right? So Nietzsche is very clearly on the cover, and this taps into an audience of not only occultists but even philosophers. Why, of all the philosophers, you chose Nietzsche as your paradigm for this book?
Yeah, so the connection with Friedrich Nietzsche and the left-hand path and a lot of subversive movements, countercultural movements, goes back really to when he was still alive. So there was actually, as I was studying Satanism and all the different texts around it, and just in the occult in general, I saw Nietzsche's name come up quite a bit. And especially within the context of Satanism. And so beyond those references, if you look at historically, you look at as far back as the mid 1890s. So you're saying the late 19th century, the fin de siècle, you saw Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy beginning to inspire some of the decadents and some of the writers and poets of the time of the Weimar period. So like Stanislav Szyszewski, who would call himself one of the first to call himself a Satanist, was a devotee of Friedrich Nietzsche. And then Hans-Ein Zurs, the German diplomat, who would then hold these lectures throughout Berlin in the 1920s called The Religion of Satan. And he was a devotee of Stanislav Szyszewski, the Polish decadent, who was inspired by Friedrich Nietzsche. So even in the very beginning of modern Satanism, now this is not to be confused with Satanisms that came before it, which, we could discuss, like theistic Satan, traditional Satanism, what that meant before that period. But this modern conception of Satanism started about the late 19th century, and Nietzsche was at the very front of it. And so, on the left-hand path side, in the left-hand path community, everyone is sympathetic. They say, fantastic, I've always wanted to see this. A book-length work of this doesn't really exist, and it makes sense. To the philosophic community, they say, how dare you corrupt Friedrich Nietzsche's name? And I mean, this comes from my master's thesis. So this was this is more or less peer reviewed, right? So they had some disagreements with it, but obviously the connection is clear.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, although you can argue the particulars, Nietzsche clearly inspired the bedrock of left-hand path philosophy as we understand it today. And although this is probably my first book-length work, I have been published in various journals and things like that. So, but you're right, this is my first book-length, besides some poetry and things like this. But as far as occult literature, it is my maiden voyage.
Well, it's your first, but definitely won't be your last. Now, okay, the next thing I wanted to ask you about is, after you started finding yourself in Satanism and you started identifying as a left-hand pather, how did your relationship with demonic entities grow as a practitioner of demonology, etc.? I mean, did you decide to go the solomonic route with the Goetia, or did you decide to do something else? How did you build that deeper relationship? Because we were talking about a time where you did a dual evocation with a previous guest of ours who we respect clearly, and I wanted to hear your approach to it. Where did you learn this adoration approach towards evocation that you were talking about?
Right. So, introduced into Satanism in more or less the late 90s, that was sort of also the beginning of another wave of Satanism because of the internet. And this was not just Satanism and left-hand path. This was the occult in general hit a kind of golden era when the internet first became widely accessible.
Yeah.
And, that began my journey into looking at these spirits in a new way. It started off with the guy himself. It started off with Satanas, with Satan, with Lucifer, with Belial, with Leviathan, and these other Abaddon and Astaroth and Lilith, and so on and so forth. So I started off very early having a sympathetic view of demons as ones not to attack or oppose, but these are, like LeVay said, I better learn to get on the side of those guys, to get on the good side of those guys. So instead of opposing them, learning how to understand them. And a lot of them were complex. So some of them were legitimately malicious spirits. And as I'm going into my next book that I'm writing with Theon Publishing, is about it's a book of demonic hymns, and some scholarly information behind the spirits and some research I've been doing over the few years. And you will see some of these spirits that are legitimately malicious, patrons of murder and things like that. But then you'll see some that are the scary owl with teeth coming out, and the description is reconciles friends and enemies and creates love, consensual love. And it's like, wait a second. So, and then somewhere like Amon or Bile or Astaroth, which very much could come from former iterations. So Astaroth likely comes from Astarte, the Hellenic goddess, likely comes from Ishtar. So then I saw that, okay, so these were transformed in the Christian theology in the Christian demonology, and they could have represented something before that. But I saw a complexity there that opened me up to a more, just like my very first experiences encountering spirits, these radically almost terrifying, but also something that deserves respect rather than fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned to respect spirits with deference, to pay deference to them, not fear, not opposition, not terror, but to acknowledge how awesome, in terms of being awe or awful, being full of awe, being full of inspiration, being full of a terror, but not necessarily it's an encounter with the divine, is terrible, not necessarily negative. And so I initiated into this world where I understand spirits in this way. And so demons naturally became companions, in the sense that I view them as guides. And that's the kind of, for the most part, that's the origination of the word. This is a guide. This is a spirit guide, a lesser spirit, or sometimes a major spirit would be called a daimon in Greek. So yeah, and that made sense. And I'm, I mentioned LaVey, and I mentioned my origination, and I mentioned Friedrich Nietzsche, and this is all leans towards the atheistic symbolic kind of world. I am very much a believer in or what you might call man of faith, and I am more inclined to the spiritual, if you want to say it like that. So I want to make sure, although we're talking about Friedrich Nietzsche and we're talking about LaVey and we're talking about the philosophical aspects, I'm also deeply religious in my path. Yes. Just because I'm deeply religious and theistic I don't like that, calling it like that, but theistic doesn't mean I can't passionately write about the philosophy behind Satanism and where it comes from. So, yeah.
All right, we have Frater Crow who says, salute, thank you for tuning in. And, I find it so amazing to hear that somebody who's actually in there, an actual Satanist, has just said that there are some demons that are like, that's cool, I can work with this. And some are like, holy shit, that's really dangerous. And it's kind of like interesting to hear that even for the guy who actually worships the devil, who's in there, there's probably some stuff that you probably would prefer not to work with, which probably we can talk about in another part of the segment. Because the next thing I wanted to ask you is, we're going to be going next to our current events segment, where we're going to be asking you about your take as somebody who takes Satanism very seriously. What do you feel is the present state of your practice or your belief systems on a global level? Is it picking up? Are people getting the right idea? Or is it kind of because of things like TikTok? Is it going to the dogs? There's a lot of posers. And ultimately, what's your forecast? How do you see it growing in the next couple of years?
Yeah. So there's a mix going on right now. So there's kind of a mix of developments. So I'm somewhat ambivalent but hopeful. So one thing that's opened up is that the left-hand path is more accessible than ever before, and you're seeing left-hand path elements that are coming in new forms. So there is, traditional witchcraft is a big movement. The left-hand path and Satanism has helped open up for traditional witchcraft to then glorify the horned one, this guy, the witch father, right? And so now, they might still shy away from the word Satan or some of that. Lucifer is now out in the open and ready. Demons are now openly kind of discussed, but, I think it requires a little bit more cohesion. I think the current community is a little bit disparate and siloed, and that's what I hope to do with my next couple of works. But so that's good in that it's now being seen as a more or less a valid path. However, I feel there are some things that are taking us back a couple of steps, and I'll kind of outline them. One is the traditional Solomonic form is being seen as more legitimate. And so you see this idea of coercing spirits. So using angels to force them to do what you want, using the names of God and Lord Adonai in order to compel the spirit to do. That is all kind of coming back. And I don't know if that's a positive development. I respect my brothers and sisters in the world of the occult. I think we all have a common goal. I also feel like we have some common enemies, and I think it makes more sense to align than not. But I'm going to call it as I see it in my experience, and what I think might not be helpful. There's also there's the idea of, there's also this knee-jerk reaction to Satanism now. That's kind of a Satan, like, instead of fearing it like it would have been 30, 40 years ago, you have some who might laugh at it and consider it, oh, those silly atheists, they dress in all black, they don't know. And there's groups like the Satanic Temple and the Church of Satan, and there's a big community. So I imagine how you could see some and think, oh, there isn't a lot of meat there. And I guess I could understand that. And that's why I think it's very important to do what I do, because I'm trying to show that the history and the culture and the intellectualism behind it is palatable and highly competitive if you're trying to compare anything. We have a long history. And so, but you have people that have a knee-jerk kind of laughing and that kind of, I think that's developed, that cynicism has become more prevalent as people have become more secular. So I think that's problematic because it's not so much trying to shut out, it's more just laughing it off as something not to take seriously. And I think that's a problem because Satanism has been growing in a very mature way. You now have an umbrella of different ways that people practice their religion. You have anti-cosmic Satanism, you have Gnostic Satanism, you have authors like Johannes Nephastos, and you have Fall of Man, and you have Aeon Sophia, and you have Ixaxar, and you have a lot of culture happening. And then you have those on the atheistic side, and you have demonolatry. It's growing up. It's getting older. If you saw the 90s and the 80s as like a high school for Satanism, it's now graduating from college. It's now getting all this rich and very scholarly and intelligent writings around it. So it's not something to fucking be ignored, and it's not something to laugh at, because there's very deeply philosophical and scholarly work happening in that area. A third, I would say, that I think is somewhat disconcerting, somewhat related to the left-hand path, but not explicitly, is, and you're not really seeing it in the left-hand path, so is the idea of compelling, again, the coercing of spirits, the compelling of ghosts and hungry ghosts, and the rise of the PGM. And that's all fun and good. You know, it's a 1800-year-old document. There's some interesting cultural stuff in there, but I'm seeing some things that are kind of like the traditional Solomonic Abrahamic structure that is about forcing a spirit to do your will, and spirits that were tortured and spirits that had suffered. And what's ironic, I would say, is that in the left-hand path, you would think you'd think the left-hand path would be the ones who are working with demons and doing evil magic, but it's actually coming from the, I don't know if you'd call it right-hand path or kind of, I don't know what you would call it, traditional ceremonial magicians that are compelling spirits by, through force and coercion and through the name of Adonai. So it's like I'm concerned about the rise of Christian supremacy within the world of the occult right now. I feel like it's slipping back in.
Yeah.
And it is what it is. And there might be a few people that hear that and are kind of upset to talk about the PGM in that way. But just because something's ancient and cultural doesn't mean it doesn't mean it's good. Doesn't mean it's ethically correct. And I thought the Satanists and the left-hand path magicians should be the unethical ones. But I'm seeing that question come up, and I see it sneaking in, and I see it finding broad acceptance without any protest. And I find that as concerning. So those are some of my thoughts about where the occult is right now. I think mostly positive for the left-hand path, but we're still facing some of the same challenges. Even I had to face it in my current promotions and some of my current projects. I see again that although I've seen some of the things I had to face in the early 2000s with, pagans and Wiccans not even wanting to be around, getting more time with Christians and respect from Christians than I did the pagan community. That has changed. Things have started to change, and we've made a lot of ground there. But I see other developments happening that we're still fighting the same battle in a different form. So, but I'm willing to do the fight, and I'm willing to do everything that's necessary within my power until I draw breath no more to make sure we move in a positive direction. So
That shows what kind
Something
of
I'm curious about is, have you worked with any of the left-hand path groups like Temple of Set or the Church of Satan or any of these organizations? Because when you were talking about seeing right-hand path groups with left-hand path philosophy creeping in there, I'm seeing the opposite in some of the other groups, where they're wanting people to embrace more of a right-hand path philosophy, but not calling it that way.
Sure, and that's actually important. That's a good question, because it points to something. It points to our lexicon here. So left-hand path, I think you guys said in the intro, you could talk about the tantric Vedic origins of what the left-hand path meant, which is a path of antinomianism to a union with God. Well, the right-hand path was like emerging, and so there's this individuation and emerging, or supplication to a God, individuation. So then with contemporary left-hand path, which is more or less, that term comes from Vedic sources, but it comes from Blavatsky traveling to Southeast Asia, picking up that term and bringing it back, and then discussing the left-hand path, the Black Lodge. She would say there's the White Lodge, we're the good witches, and then the Black Lodge are those evil guys. And so that's where the left-hand path in our current way that we're speaking it, and that's what would inspire Aleister Crowley and Kenneth Grant, and that's what would start that term coming into the occult sphere. But what does it mean today? Okay, so the left-hand path today is it's starting to become a little bit ambiguous. So what it used to maybe mean 60, 70 years ago is we're willing to do black magic, and we're willing to work with demons, and we're willing to do these things that the right-hand path, really the term right-hand path became popular because Anton LaVey started to use it as a derogatory term. So there's no right-hand people really unironically calling themselves right-hand path. It's really left-hand path people that use that to kind of individuate, or to kind of deviate from them. So, so there's like a moral question back then. There was an ethical. We're willing to use magic to get ahead. We're willing to be individuals. We're not trying to supplicate to a god. That was more made sense in the 60s and 70s. But now what does it mean today? You have the right-hand path, traditional witches that are doing. That's why there's a crooked path. Everyone's crooked path, really. What that means is you have now witches that are more open to malefic magic because they think there's justification. There's looking to traditional gods from Greece and Rome, and like Hecate, which was not, she would kill your child if you didn't give a proper sacrifice, and then she would save the child if you did. And so there was a mix there. All those gods were very mercurial. So that's kind of changed the ethical question in magic. Now it's not so much like getting ahead, so-called, is okay. And in the left-hand path, once we got out of the grips of kind of the atheistic modalities, so the Church of Satan, the Temple of Set, no, actually Temple of Set's not. That's more esoteric. Like the Church of Satan, Satanic Temple. There wasn't a supplication, there wasn't a devotional aspect, but that's not the case anymore. There's a lot of devotional Satanists. I'm a devotional Satanist. Luciferians, demonolators. So in demonolatry, they worship the demons. They give respect to them, sometimes not even asking for anything. So now that used to be a right-hand path thing, but that's not the case anymore. So you're right. Way to highlight that there's some confusion there, and I agree with you. Now I think the only maybe useful aspect of saying left-hand path today is to say that here's a collection of religions that I'm a part of. It could be Luciferianism, Satanism, demonolatry, but I identify as a left-hand path magician, which means I work with certain deities, and so that makes sense. Outside of that, it's not really relevant anymore. But the Church of Satan, to answer your question now, the Church of Satan, I was a member of the Church of Satan immediately when I turned 18. It took them 11 years to approve my application. But by then I had so many things about me that they wouldn't allow into the church. Again, like I said, I don't have any of the atheistic, and they got really strict on that after LaVey died. They got really strict on what you consider magic and Satan, and whether you believe them. Do you believe in them? If you do, then you're out. The Temple of Set I have high respect for. Aquino, I know some Setians, so I have high respect for that. But other than that, I have formed my own groups. but I never quite felt drawn enough to plug into a hierarchy, one that I was able to give a consistent devotion to. So at this point, not really, but I have done group work for years. I love group work. It was just never within the context of a magical order.
I was with the temple for a while, and one of the things that amazed me about membership in the temple is that they were all very educated. They were all very erudite. They were well spoken. They knew a lot, and about half of them didn't actually believe that magic was a real thing, which I was thunderstruck when I found out about this. And you're like, so what is it that you're doing? Because they had the concept of lesser black magic and greater black magic, which is psychobabble and psychodrama, respectively, to have the effect on yourself or on others, depending on what you're doing. But there was a little known thing in there which Aquino had called medial black magic, which was actual magic. But almost none of them produced it. And when we had a pylon in Seattle where we did some rituals that actually produced effects, these people were blown away. They had never seen anything like it. And I thought, these are just the side effects from the ritual. This isn't even the goal yet. And so I don't know if you've ever been if you've ever had any experience with magicians who didn't believe in magic, but it's really kind of it's a strange thing.
Yeah,
it's like Christians against Christ. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I mean, right. So what we saw is, what's developed, and this kind of more or less started with, this started in the time of LaVey, where Satanism began with this idea of we are the more reasonable ones. And although in private, according to Aquino and others, LaVey was far more a believer than he put on. But he knew that if he came out and started sounding woo-woo, like I worship the devil, yeah, we do actually believe in Satan, but not the way you think. He thought that was going to affect the perception of the church. And he wanted the church to be a serious movement. And so, but at the same time, there was always this, well, we're more reasonable, we're more rational. That was always the angle. We're more scientific, even talking about magic as a scientific operation, as like a pseudoscientific operation. And, that's what made his magic distinct and to some more legitimate. Now, Aquino kind of broke off from that. So around 1975 is when he broke out from the Church of Satan. He took 30 or 40 people or from the COS, and they kind of they kind of split apart. There was a stigma or schism rather, and they got a little more like, okay, Set is the older form of Satan, and he's a legitimate force, the Prince of Darkness, as Aquino likes to say. And although they were a bit more religious, there was people who stayed with that rational idea that this is about bioelectrical energy, and this is about there's scientific reasons or psychological. The way I always did, and when I taught my students, is I see it as a soup with various ingredients, and as long as the soup tastes good, regardless of the ingredients and how you get there, I think it's important. If that's your path to empowerment or that's your path to belief, I'm not one to judge it. Just don't try to universalize it. Don't just try to tell me how right or wrong I am based on your personal gnosis. But if you want to take it on your own and you believe I believe magic is a collection of all those things. I believe there's this absolutely mysterious spiritual element, and I think there's complete scientific, valid reasons for doing it. Even if it is just psychological, this gives me the leg up. If I'm putting these candles out here, and even if none of this exists, this is a nice, good confidence boost. It's a lot of fun, so on and so forth. I believe very much there's a lot more going on. I'm a more supernaturalist, if you want to call that. But I say, even for practitioners, even if you think it's just psychological, do you, and get all the power, the empowerment that comes out of the world of the occult and the mysteries. It's just, don't try to come into different circles and tell us what it is, Well,
like Arthur C. Clarke said, that any sufficiently advanced science is indistinguishable from magic. I think the reverse is also true. if you advance it far enough to where you're understanding all of the forces, or at least have a reasonable working grasp on all the forces in play, that's a science. They have two meeting points depending on which side you're coming at them from, but they do converge.
And it's important, though, that we always keep in mind that respect, because the subjectivity of magic is very important. That what could work for one couldn't work for the other. So I do like your soup analogy, where it's like, yeah, as long as you like how it tastes, it's up to you. But what works for me may not work for you. And as long as that respect is shown, then it's basically everybody's own preference. Which leads me to my next question, Shea. Since I don't identify as a left-hand pather, but I have a lot of respect for it. Would you say that to be left-hand path would be a more polytheistic approach to occultism and magic? Or from your approach, do we have only one deity that we look towards, which would be Satan? Or is it more open to working with and communing with other gods?
Yeah, I think the left-hand path or right-hand path or crooked path or non-affiliated, is not really contingent on the level of polytheism. I feel the left-hand path does, on its face, certainly allow for a lot more freedom with spirits. And I think demonolatry gets a little more complex. You often see in demonolatry, you'll see like a henotheism. So that is the idea that you have a patron deity and there's others, you just don't worship them, right? So there's a belief in multiple demons. You just have a particular hierarchy. And, with Satanists, most Satanists are polytheistic. Most Satanists have other gods or deities. I've become less polytheistic as I get older, but that doesn't mean I lose a belief in any gods. I call myself an omnitheist. That is, I believe any and all gods are possible and exist. Any and all gods that are possible exist. And but really when it comes down to it, I move between a monotheism to a henotheism to a polytheism, a pantheism. These move around for me so that it depends on the context of which I'm expressing myself religiously, that Satan and these deities take on different kinds of ontologies. So their ontological status shifts in context with my devotion, but always existent, just existing in different ways, in different periods, in different times, and even in different rites. So, but I think, in another way to answer that question is the left-hand path definitely facilitates a freedom of choice. And that, I think, is what makes it distinct broadly, is that you have the freedom to worship any god that you want, and you're more or less endorsed to do so.
You see, this is one thing I've observed just by speaking to you and the interactions we've had. A lot of people who enter Satanism that I've met or into demonology, working with demons, enter with a very self-serving perspective. I want this from the demons or from the devil, and you will give it to me. But you're probably one of the first Satanists that I've ever met that has a semblance of faith. And I wanted to ask you, not faith in God, but faith in your choice of what you've chosen to believe in. And I did want to ask you now, what role does faith play in your practices? Because it seems that this is not, I am compelling, controlling, commanding spirits. I am actually devoting to these spirits, and it's very powerful. How does that play a role in your magical practices?
It guides. It's the foundation of all of it. So faith in a sense of, I do not pursue a spirit explicitly, a demon or a deity, to necessarily ask for anything. I pursue it often initially from just devotion. I want to give to you. I want to give offerings to you. I want to live my life in accordance with your will or in accordance with those aspects of your belief. And those are blessings and gifts. Those are the treasure that I find in religious practice. I am more a religionist than I'm a religionist first, then an occultist. I pay devotion to a particular deity and sometimes a collection of deities, and that guides my life, every aspect of my life. So I act on faith, and I act on that devotion, and I act on that relationship, that religious relationship, that spiritual relationship that I build with these spirits, and that guides all of my practice and all of my religious observation, and that's at the very forefront. I often find, however, that I don't always have to ask for things, actually. It's rare that I have to actually ask for things. I find that giving devotion to a spirit and doing so earnestly, I often find that the things, that things work out, and the things I would have asked for usually come, and I find a blessing there. So, but even if I was absolutely at my last breath, at the very end of the line, I would hope that my last few words would be a prayer to my God. So
Beautiful.
that's the direction I come in. You're going to get there's a lot in the left-hand path that might not like some of that supplicatory language. But I have a relationship with my master. The idea of a master, the idea of a father Satan, the master.
Yeah.
Some might be uncomfortable with that, but there's a lot that I think are enthusiastic about it, to have that left-hand path, something to grab onto. I also, one thing I learned when I lived in Belgium for about 1.5 years, and I went to visit the Lucifer statue, the Lucifer of Liège, or the Génie du Mal, which is the famous statue in the cathedral, that Lucifer that's shackled down, and he's got this, and he's all cut. This guy's all pumped, dude. He's all jacked. And I went to go visit it, and I saw Lucifer in this shattered position. He's got a broken crown. He's holding a melted rod. There's a bitten apple on the floor, and he looks just shattered. And it made me uncomfortable. How can I view Lucifer like this? Lucifer, for all my life, was this inspiring, powerful rebel. I see him now in a state of weakness. This made me uncomfortable. But then like an hour or so later, I thought about it, and I went, one thing that's missing from the left-hand path is powerlessness and the vulnerability. And that some days I don't feel like a god. Like some days are horrible. I have this, in the left-hand path, you're told, be a god, apotheosis, rise above God, become this powerful magician. The world is at your fingertips. But some days are shitty, and some days you're far from being a god, and sometimes it's hard to even be human. And I learned that, if Lucifer could be shattered, if he could have given everything to fight against this guy, and he lost it all, he gambled it all for what he believes in, and he lost it. And if I can see my God in a state of vulnerability, then surely I can afford that to myself. So what the left-hand path I realize is missing is a Jesus Christ. And Lucifer, for me in that moment, became that Jesus Christ that I needed. Someone who understands that you're going through pain and understands that you're not powerful at that moment, and that you might be crushed and defeated, but you need that strength to kind of gather things, feel the pain, shed the tears, and get back up. And that's one aspect that I find that devotion gives you, rather than that completely secular kind of become your own God, non-servium. I feel like it doesn't have that vulnerability and that devotion offers, that religious faith offers.
Damn.
Speaking of, I haven't seen this particular statue, but I'm also looking at this from the viewpoint of the kink dynamic. Bear with me, this is going to get weird. But the being the one who's in chains, there's a whole different kind of power going on in this relationship, because the one who put you in chains has to maintain that, and they have to maintain you. And now you're in a position where you've lost everything, which there's an old saying, empty pockets hold more. I don't know who first said it, but I read it and I thought this was great, because if you have, with the point where you have nothing to lose, and it's just infinite potential, because now you have everything to gain. You can begin everything the way you want. You don't have to worry about how to take the world that you have and make it what you want, because you have all the power to create your own. They're saying, oh, well, they put him in hell. Yes. Who designed hell? He did. Who decides who goes there? He does. Who decides what happens there? He does. It's a whole different dynamic. at that point. And I mean, it's not a matter of like trying to, topping from the bottom. It's a matter of taking the power of a whole different situation and running with it. Because in a way, he's still in control of the relationship between him and God. God's saying, well, we have to keep him down there. And he's just like, yeah, but you're keeping yourself up there.
This brings me to my next question, Shea. Like, okay, if I were to ask a typical run-of-the-mill, standard vanilla occultist, and they'd ask, okay, what wouldn't you do? Unfortunately, a lot of them would villainize Satanism, say, oh, I wouldn't touch that. That's the extreme end of it for me. But in your case, this is the normal for you. This is the beauty. This is the light. I'm curious, for you, what would the extreme end be for you? Practices or ideologies that be like, hell no, that's not me. That's not what I'm willing to touch in. Because, like, I'm curious from a Satanist point of view. It's like if I was talking to a Christian witch or something like that, a Christian magician saying, oh, I'm not going to touch that satanic crap. Sorry for saying that. But from your point of view, because you seem to be a man of faith, a very open-minded and powerful and passionate man, I'm curious, what is the stuff that you wouldn't touch?
There's quite a bit, actually. So I just might have different reasons, and some shockingly similar ones than like a Christian might have, actually. So although, let's start with some of the more obvious ones. So like curses, malicious magic, or malefic magic, or baneful magic. I don't like to do it, and I only do it, and the older I get, the less I do it. The last, I only do it now when I'm absolutely forced, and even then I don't like to, just because, one thing I disagree with some of modern Satanism is, well, if it's just and it makes sense, then there's going to be nothing necessarily negative from it. And I don't know if I fully agree with that. I'm not it comes back to you times 3, what turned me off 25 years ago, 30 years ago. And I'm not there with it. I don't think it's inherently evil, but I think if you orient, in magic, you orient your spirit and your mind and your body with an intention. That's what makes it work, is you bring everything in your world in alignment with that. And if everything in your world is in alignment with, I want to fucking kill this guy, I don't think you step away from that necessarily. I think it drags you down in a particular spiritual way. You don't necessarily want to, you don't want hate to be at the forefront just in general. So do I think it's justified and it makes sense for justice? 100%. But is it something I'm going to be very, very discretionary towards? I pay more deference to baneful magic. It's something I don't really want to engage in very much. But it's there and it's an option for me. I don't think I'm going to hell. I just don't know if it's part of a healthy diet if you're resorting to that. And I think there's other ways we can try to constructively work things out outside of the magical scheme of baneful magic. That's one thing. Human parts is becoming really cool and popular right now. I won't touch human parts. I think I see it as disrespect of the dead. Now I know there's other cultures. I know there's other cultures that have ancestor worship and things like that. But I think, I think now we're getting to a point where owning human skulls and hands and fingers and bones is considered, you get aid from that spirit. I think it's fucking, I think for the most part, it's psychopathic. I think you're coercing a spirit to do your will, a dead spirit who's not consenting. I think it's weird. So I think for that aspect of it, but just for having dead remains on its own, that was not a very close relationship to you. I have my dead friend's ashes, my best friend who passed. He lost his battle to heroin 6-7 years ago. I have his ashes, and at his memorial among friends, we put in wine and I consumed his ashes. And I still have some of his ashes, and that makes sense to me. But unless it's someone very close that you love that is perfectly okay with that explicitly, I think it's odd, and I think it's dehumanizing, and I think it's disrespectful. So I believe you should respect the dead. and I think you should pay deference to the dead, especially those who are not connected to you in any way. Defiling graves and defiling body parts, I think, is evil. And that's another thing. If I say something's evil as a Satanist, what does that mean? I mean it's a horrible.
When the Satanist called you evil, you're fucked, man.
You're fucked. Dude, you're fucked.
It's like, what the fuck? The Satanist called you evil.
It is not. You're not doing okay. So, but I know
even in the African diasporic traditions, you can work with like bones and all this, but there's, like you're saying, there's the level of consent. You have to get consent from the dead to use the remains, because if you don't, it's going to be extremely dangerous for you, because it's not only disrespectful to them, but now they have full access to you 24 hours a day, and they will fuck your shit up. So yeah, it's got to be with consent.
Yeah, just out of common sense, out of a sense of you're not going to go through the hood Saturday at 1 a.m. and like look like someone you can that can be fucked with. It's the same thing in that just it is very reckless to come, even if you didn't care about these traditions at all. You didn't care about the dead. You had zero empathy. It is stupid to deal with these things, especially spirits that died under states that you don't know. You don't know how they died. You don't know if you believe in an afterlife modality, or you believe in these things. Then people could die going through their own journeys. They could be torturous spirits. In fact, in the PGM, they call them hungry ghosts. These are spirits that died under horrible circumstances. So you're actually seeking them out because you consider them more powerful. To me, that's sociopathic, and it's manipulative, and it's odd. And I think it's stupid. I think you're dealing with something that I think is going to take. We've heard about this for thousands of years. They're going to get their pound of flesh. The house always wins. And thinking you can just dilly-dally disrespectfully and get what you want because you want to get a new lover, or you want to get some money, or you want to get a new job, or you want to manipulate the bank teller at the bank to go on a date with you, and you take some girl or someone who died in some malicious circumstances because she's going to be more powerful of a spirit, and you're compelling them to get your trite materialistic magic. I think that's evil, and I think it's malicious. I think it's sociopathic. And
well, it's extremely unwise. I mean, it's like saying, well, I have gophers in my front yard, so I'm going to build a small dirty bomb out of some depleted uranium, and I'm going to blow up my front yard. You're like, great. Well, now you live in a toxic wasteland. You could have used the proper tools to do this, but now you've taken something that is inherently dangerous and you've used it unwisely. And guess what's going to happen to the rest of your lawn?
It
just seems like using the wrong tool for the job.
This brings me to something I read about a couple of years ago, that in Thailand, there's actually a very powerful practice there where some black magicians will try to get aborted fetuses and roast them into oil at the expense of like some sort of really black, horrible gnosis, saying that in order for you to do what can't be done, you must be willing to do what others cannot do. And there are sorcerers in Thailand who will do that stuff. And it's like, there's nothing more innocent than a child. It's like, for fuck's sake, man.
100%. And what's happening in our current culture, which is like the horseshoe starts to come back. It's like, we want to be more culturally sensitive. We want to not be, we don't want to be appropriate. We don't want to appropriate cultures and things like that. What's interesting is, I think, let's judge everyone equally. I believe in equity. I believe in judging everyone. Try to treat them with respect and treat their cultures with respect and try to understand them. But just because something is 3,000 years old, or just because something comes from Thai witchcraft or whatever, doesn't mean it's ethically good at all. There was assholes in those cultures, and thousands of years ago, those magicians that would have defiled graves and used it in order to get. Just because it's ancient doesn't mean it's good. That's a fallacious appeal to historical appeal, fallacious appeal to naturalism. Just because it's natural, it isn't good, or just because it's old, it isn't good. So there were sociopaths back then too. They're also in a state of desperation, and and a lot of them were fucking starving, and they had to do what they could to survive. Very different, and also still not good. to hurt others to get ahead. Again, this is coming from a Satanist, so it's a pretty scathing indictment. But I believe in accountability, and I believe in responsibility, and I believe paying in respect, especially those things that should be cherished. Like children, as you mentioned, like children should be protected and they should be cherished. This is universal. Compelling their ghost to do something for you is likened to spiritual rape.
Agreed.
And also, what's the child spirit going to do for you? I mean, how much power did this thing have when it was alive? Are you really going to have, is I'm going to hire a 5-year-old to clean my house? Okay, we'll get ready for a lot of candy wrappers.
I think it's just gnosis of perversion, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. And what I like about it is that with Shea here, he could be a Satanist, but he never lost his ethics. He never lost his morals. And I think that you're a shining example of what modern Satanists should be. Because just because you worship the devil doesn't mean you need to be a fucking sicko or a fucking maniac. You can actually do it beautifully and respectfully and be a positive example. And, to you, I salute you. And that's one of the major reasons why I chose to platform you. Which will bring us.
And also, I mean, if you have a situation where you want to use malefic magic against somebody, there's always, at least in my experience, there's always a nice way to do it. To put it differently, I had a coworker that was just annoying the hell out of everybody, always being late, being really belligerent, and nobody liked working with this person. So I was thinking, like, well, maybe we should get her fired. And I thought, what'll work better? Get her a good job somewhere else. And one day she came in and was just like, I'm gone. I'm out of here. You don't have to see me anymore. I've got a better job, blah, blah, blah. And she's bragging about this other job. And we all got rid of her, and there was zero resistance.
Perfect.
There's always a good way to do it.
Yeah, there's a path of least resistance. I'm going to refuel
All right.
So if I get a moment.
All right, sure. So anyhow, we're just going to put me and Wade back up.
Yeah, we can yammer about magic all day.
Yeah, like as we were going, it's really nice to see that. Because I don't like the stereotype that people make about Satanists. Like, it's the Satanists, like the satanic panic and shit like that from the 80s. Something going wrong, it's always the fucking Satanists. And I don't mean to insult.
Oh my god!
Like even with
I remember the satanic panic from the 80s. It was hilarious.
The sad thing about it, recently, what happened with the QAnon stuff, where they were saying stuff like, no, there's a secret cabal of satanic children eaters who own pizza shop. They never once thought to think that these.
Oh my God, Pizzagate was hysterical.
That was nonsense. And the saddest thing about it is the amount of people who actually bought into it. And here's the thing: 90% of the time, and then 99% of the time, they're not even satanic. In most cases, they are your regular churchgoers of some hick Baptist Bible Belt group or something like that. Like if you've ever seen the show True Detective, it was so creepy because you'd think that it was some evil, dark, satanic cult. These are people hiding in the church. You see what I mean? And I really love what Shea is doing, because Shea here is giving a positive approach to something that has previously negative stereotypes. And that's the message that Magic.TV wants to show, is that, guys, he is worshiping the devil. It doesn't make him a villain. You know what I mean? He could literally be a satanic paladin. You know what I mean? Think about that. Because
a lot of it, though, is a lot of times Satanism is your go-to bad guy because he's the ultimate stereotypical villain. So they want to say, well, I don't like these people. Oh, they must be Satanists. To the point where they actually did a Law and Order about QAnon in the pizza shop.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous because, I do know that there are people who do bad things. There are satanic people who do bad things. You know what? Guess what? There are also Christian people who do bad things. There are also Hindu people who do bad things. And
people do bad things. Humans suck.
Exactly. So it doesn't necessarily generalize everything. And one of the things that I like about what he's written about and what he substantiates is that, number one, self-power is there, but you can be a decent human being when you do it. You see what I mean? Like if I played the last segment when he was talking about protection of children, and I played it in some evangelical Christian page, they'd all probably like it until we tell them who actually said it. Then they'd freak out. You know what I mean?
Well, that's one of the 11 satanic laws of the earth. is
I know
you
that.
don't harm the young of your species. That's just nature's law. And what's really funny is I've like made a sanitized version of the 11 satanic laws of the earth. You take out like references to the devil and all that,
Mhm.
and you put it. I pitched it to people. I put it on this new age message board the one time. It had like the silhouette of a wolf and a tree and the moon in the background, and then the 11 laws of the earth. And they were all, "Oh my God, this is so true. This is wonderful. Everyone should live like this." And one person pointed out, says, "Wait, I've seen this before," and he pulled up a page for the 11 satanic, and he's like, he's trying to slip satanic philosophy in here. And I'm like, you were all on board with it when you saw the content,
You
but
agreed
now
with
you
the
see the
context, but you
context
didn't
and it's
agree
a
with the
whole different
source.
thing.
Yeah. So anyhow, Shea, welcome back. And right now we're going to go to the occult segment of the show. This is where you, the master, teach us, the viewers, something. It could be as complex, simple, helpful, whatever it is you'd like. We're all eager to hear from probably one of the most pure-hearted Satanists I've ever met in my life.
I take that as an extreme compliment. Thank you so much. So, just a lesson related to the occult, or
Anything
kind of
practical. It could be a prayer, it could be a song, it could be a spell, it could be a method, whatever works for it's as long as it's from the heart, we're here to take it.
Could even be a helpful tip, like how to wax your tarot cards so they
Oh God,
shuffle
don't
easier.
start with that one again. Come on, man.
That was great.
Yeah,
That was
what?
good. You know what that reminded me of? In what's it, the Spider-Verse movie, when he's talking to the OG Spider-Man, he's like, "Do you have any hints for me? Any tips?" He's, "Yeah, use baby powder in the suit. Go heavy on the joints." But that's something you would need to know.
True. All right, so knock us out, Shea.
Yeah. I think what I'll do is I kind of talked a little bit about it earlier, and the idea of devotion or theurgy, and I'll discuss about that as it relates to Left Hand Path. But I think I'll start it off. It is Sunday, and Lucifer associated with the sun in Friedrich Nietzsche and the Left Hand Path. I wrote a few hymns at the end because it is a philosophical work, but Nietzsche often he paid adoration, and it was very central to his work, Dionysus, the Dionysian current. He talks about the Dionysian versus the Apollonic, and these forces that exist within the way that we can conceive these forces, how they exist in our world. And so I included the hymn of Dionysus and a hymn of Apollo, because these are two forces in his philosophy. And then I added a hymn of Satan and a hymn of Lucifer, because what I do is I tie Satan and his symbology to Nietzsche's Dionysus, and then Lucifer to Apollo. Being Sunday, I'll recite the hymn of Lucifer.
Please turn to page 274 of your.
I know.
In
your Bible, we gather here today.
No one said it can't be fun. We can enjoy ourselves.
No, right. O Lux Fere, O bear of the first dawn, and the brimstone of creation born within your iris, whose Venusian light sets hearts aflame that elevates and unshackles the spirit, who stands astride the midsummer solstice, a daylight that rises forever ascended. May you alight my path with your golden glory that inflames the angels of my awakening and feeds my tears to the winter soil. Bless me with the warmth of your torches, that unextinguishable first flame of creation. May you bless me with your perfect presence, mighty prince of the powers, angel of the air, king of crimson enthroned far above heaven. You birthed man with your breath and whispered paradise into our prayers. O morning star, who planted the first seed in shadow and in death, a rebellion of light and life, and endless holy nothing illuminated for eternity, the promise of a pomegranate and an aeon of enlightenment. You are the first vision beheld by man upon waking. You are the love and light emblazoned upon our pupils, the last light after the darkness returns us. O Luciferi, Lucifer, most beautiful bearer of a sun descending, whose eternal morning dances upon the horizon, bless me with your haloed dawn, and birth me into the heart of a scarlet heaven. Bless me with your soaring sight, a herald of truth, divine and undefiled, illuminating, absolute, imminent, and unfolding. O never-setting sun, wingless seraphim of my being, bleed me into your daylight where every shadow is shorn. Burn me inside your body where ashes live eternal lives. Son of Aurora, borealis of my being, master of the tamarind tree ever growing, serpent of salvation, apple of the ages, eat my ashes and bury me beneath the sun setting. Lift me beyond a beautiful death. Plant me and pierce heaven with my being. May you blind me in your easterly light, where you bore the first gift. Drown me in the rising tide, and in you I open my eyes again.
Beautiful.
Testify.
Amen.
So
Thank you. That was good.
Yeah, thanks. There's I believe what's missing in the world, not just I think the left-hand path is actually getting pretty good at it now. But what I think's missing in the occult is the idea of not asking for things, taking a moment to stop asking for things, and taking a moment to build a relationship with your spiritual self and with your spirit and with your Godhead. And for those that don't even believe necessarily in a deity, take a moment from a Buddhistic sense to understand the world you live in and your place in it, and think about it and show gratitude for it, and use magic and use the candles and use the incense and use the sigils to show gratitude to life, and to appreciate why you're here and appreciate the things you have. This doesn't mean that we have to subjugate ourselves to circumstances that are beyond our power. This doesn't mean that we have to be victims to a person or to a situation and just kind of roll over on our backs. But what this does mean is that you take a moment to stop, to appreciate what you have, rather than keep imploring, give me more, I need more, I need more. And every time you preach a spirit, and then every time you light a candle, it ends up being to ask for something. I need something. Every time you light incense, every time you consult a book, it's because you're trying to ask for something. And I think that's actually created a disconnection from spirit. And it's actually taking the magic out of the world because it's become pragmatic. This is almost like not just secular, because even you see it in Buddhism and Jainism, and you see it in Confucianism. They're secular in a sense. But even they have an appreciation for their meal, and they have appreciation for the world and the beauty of the world. This is secular in a different way that I think's infected the occult, in that you've come to just a transactional relationship with the world, and that my worth is only measured by what I've gained and what I don't have. And it is important to fight for things, and it is important to understand yourself and your place in the world and grow from it, and to evolve and to want better for yourself. Absolutely. This is to the very bones of being human. This is what pulled us out of the veldt. This is what pulled us out of the plains and the forests, and this is what brought us into a higher into an evolutionary path. Whether it's higher or not, it's hard to say, but it brought us into who we are and what it means to be human. A collection of poetry and tragedy, a collection of beauty and ugliness, of love and hate. And this is what makes us human. So that tragedy and that struggle and that suffering is a part of human life, right? So it makes sense to seek relief. However, I would merely suggest that seeking an appreciation of the spirit, of yours, of the spirits you pursue, and building a relationship before you ask for something, because it's meeting someone and getting to know them. At least, so even if you're out to build something in your life, and that's one of your main reasons for dealing with a spirit, build a relationship first. You don't meet someone at a bar, you meet someone at a show, or you meet someone at work and you go, hey, can I borrow your car? Like within 5 minutes, you're asking for something. And even if you were to go up to him and say, here's $10, can I borrow your car? Like it's awkward. And I would merely suggest we view our human relationships, your spirit relationships, and bring them a little bit closer. I would say with far more deference. So that transactional thing, I think, might be corrupting a magical practice. It might be holding it back. So it's actually coming to the spirit and building a relationship, saying, I've studied you. I've come to appreciate who you are. The images, the illustrations, the art that has defined you for the last 2,000 years. These are important to me and they're beautiful. And I want to give to you because I want to learn who you are. And I want to understand where you're from. Allow them to talk to you. Allow the world to talk to you and listen. Magic is listening. Magic is understanding the world. To know is the very first step. To know, to will, to dare, and to keep silent. So listen. You must listen to know. You must listen. So inject this amount of devotion and consider it for your practice as being a part of your practice, and learning how to not ask for something. Learning how to merely give respect to a spirit or a demon, and perhaps never asking anything from it. Just basking in the divinity and that magical experience. What it means to be a magician. What it means to cohort, to familiarize yourself with the spiritual world. This is a beautiful thing we used to appreciate as children. A lot of us, when we first got into it, it was so explosively magical. It was so crazy. Like, you're using these tools and you're creating changes in the world. That's insane. This is mythological. Recapture that magic by being a devotional adherent to a spirit, by being and even if not a named spirit, paying devotion to the magical world itself and to magic itself, and taking a moment to go, this is incredible. The secrets and the mysteries that I've been fortunate enough and I've been lucky enough to be exposed to. And that is a beautiful thing. To be a magician in this world and to be an occultist is to sample and taste divinity in this life. And that is a magical and powerful experience. And that alone deserves worship and deserves faith and deserves adoration. So I suggest to you, dear reader, to consider the role of devotion in your life. And whether you come from a secular atheist perspective and it's all science, think of the psychological benefit of taking a moment to show gratitude to your life and what you have and what you fought for. Remember where you came from, and remember how far you've come and what you're becoming. And just give a moment to think of that, because that's a magical act. That's a blessing to go, you're damn right, I fought hard to get here. And I'm happy from how far I've come. And I'm going to take a moment to appreciate that. That's a magical act. That's a ritual. But even on the faithful side, think about giving deference to these spirits and what they deserve. These powerful, terrible, awesome, beautiful entities that are far beyond our comprehension, that we're lucky enough to have encounters with. Let's pay them a bit of deference and let's build a relationship before we coerce them into getting things for us. Let's not be so selfish, and let's actually be in a different way selfish. That is, selfish of ourselves in having an experience of beauty and an experience with the world and the beauty of the world and the cosmos itself, and finding that peace within ourselves. And I promise you, a practice that is defined by devotion or has an element of devotion to that, I promise you, you're likely to find yourself more at peace with what you do and more at peace with your practice.
That's so beautifully said, man. Fuck, dude. You're the gold standard, dude. I have no regrets putting you on this show. So before we wrap up today, I just like you to plug yourself, where you're going to be, what's your upcoming events, where can they get this soon-to-be collector's item book? I got mine signed by the man himself.
Nice.
Love this one. So tell us, where can we get this wonderful book, Frederick Nietzsche and the Left-Hand Path? What else is coming? And do you have any public appearances, workshops, anything you want to plug?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, brother. Thank you so much. Yeah, the Friedrich Nietzsche and the Left Hand Path was published by Atramentis Press, and there's still some books there, but you can also there's books with Miskatonic. I like Larry Roberts quite a bit, so you can always go to Miskatonic to pick up if you're in North America. Also, Anathema has some as well. Gabriel, who runs Anathema, deserves some attention. It's a great publisher.
We're guesting him soon, by the way.
Oh, great. Fantastic. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You know, I love Gabriel. I love the work. Gabriel is devoted to this culture and to his number one concern. Talk about devotion. His number one concern is spreading good work and participating in it and devoting his life to it. So he has my highest respect. Same thing for Larry as well. These are fantastic individuals, professional individuals that I pay my highest respect to. There's also Cyclic Law. There's brick and mortar stores around the U.S. and Canada and Europe. So there's Watkins. There's Watkins book in London. There's Courtyard Books in London. There's Dark Star in Portland, Oregon. Mm-hmm. There's Crooked Path in LA. Yeah. There's Splendor Solis in New Hampshire. And there's Oak and Tree, if I remember, in Canada. So there's these different stores that are carrying it that have, you know, found interest in the work and have decided to put it out there. So you could find, in short, you can find Friedrich Nietzsche and the Left Hand Path everywhere, but I would ask you to pay attention to those more independent. They're all really independent, but I would pay attention to those fiercely independent stores that stand for something. And so I would always push you to purchase things there. My next book is going to be Hymns of the Red Dragon, which is going to be a hymnal of a collection of demons, and that's going to be published through Theon. I recently did a workshop in LA, and it was great. It was a packed house, and I did a 2-hour workshop on demonolatry and the history of demonolatry. And part of that research, I thought, I really love these hymns that I put in here, and that one of which I just kind of recited. And I put some of them on YouTube, and I thought, I really love this. I think there's not enough of this. And so I decided I will put something, so I'm going to have a book published probably in the fall with Theon. That will be a collection of hymns and a bit of research, deeper research. Take some of the research I did with Friedrich Nietzsche and kind of continue it, even though it's two different worlds. Friedrich Nietzsche and Left Hand Path is a cult philosophy. And for it to go into a book of devotional demonic hymns seems like a departure, but it's actually not. It ended with hymns, and it's going to continue with hymns. So I am very excited about that. I have some speaking engagements planned for next year. Besides the workshop, I was on the fence of going to Old Culture in Berlin. I did it last year, but I'll probably do it next year. So I'm taking this year off to do that. But I'll have some events in 2024 where I'll speak at a few. One I think is going to be in Weymouth. It's an International Left Hand Path convention. And one is probably Old Culture. I'll probably go to Old Culture. And by then I'll have my second book with Theon out. But look out for all of that. That's what's going on at the moment. Thank you, guys.
Amazing. So you know what? From the bottom of my heart, Shea, it's been an amazing thing learning from you. Now we're gonna put you off the stream, and then don't go anywhere. We usually talk to our guests after the show. Don't just hang up. But from the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of Magic.tv, my friend, you have educated and enlightened us in ways we've never imagined. More power to you, my brother. You are an officer and a gentleman in the Universal Army. So I'm going to remove you right now. And Wade, as usual, my friend, that's been a blast. We've got somebody special coming in next. The next episode is going to be July 15th. It's going to be on a Saturday, and I'm hearing he won't be able to make it. The formal announcement will be done in a couple of days. But dude, that was amazing. Season 3 is kicking ass, man. So once again, Wade, see you when I see you. Oh no, we'll see you at the end of the month because we have somebody special coming in too, right? We're both looking forward to that.
All right, then.
Good night, everyone.
Devotional.